Srinivas has put together a very good program. And at the outset, let's wish a happy birthday to Sharat for this month, as well as Swapi, uh, who is like another Eid Ka Chand. We don't see him much, but I'll convey all of your greetings to him. So happy birthday, Sharat.
Happy
Uh,
birthday, Sharat.
Happy birthday, Sharat.
Thanks, guys.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank
and
you. Thank
as
you,
we
everybody.
do,
Happy
Happy
birthday,
Sharat,
birthday.
Sharat.
we want a few words of wisdom from you before we go
Wisdom,
on.
I'm not so sure. Few words you will get.
Go
No,
ahead.
this is a wonderful club that we set up. Remember being one of the founder members at that time. How many? 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, almost.
A little more
And
than 5 years,
more than
yes.
5 years, and I think it's absolutely wonderful in terms of the books that we've managed to read. For me personally, at that time, I still remember having the discussion with Milind that the habit of reading had disappeared, and I was really not focusing on getting myself to spend the time to read. And what the club has given and the group has given is the benefit of reading books that I would never have otherwise chosen myself. And I think to me that is the unique, really unique benefit that I've seen. And it's wonderful to be able to get to know new authors that I would never have looked at and new themes. And it's just wonderful to be with you guys. I think it's the friendliest book club, that the friendliest group on WhatsApp that I have, if I might say that. Okay.
Thank you so much, Sharat, and happy birthday again.
Thank you guys.
So let me see if
Listen to the music.
Srinivas chose this very beautifully as a glimpse of classical music that brings out loneliness and solitude on the one hand, and the East meets West idea that we read about in the book that we've just finished reading. So I liked it for both those reasons. So let's move on. And let me see if I can get Kiran Desai to talk to us for a couple of minutes.
I do think that a knowledge of darkness, along with the lighter, more beautiful moments, makes you a better artist. And I always tell anyone who wants to write that is really the secret, is keeping a diary. And I make notes all the time. And when I was writing The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, I had these stacks of diaries to look back at and to draw on. I wrote all the Indian bits in India, the horse cars bits in horse cars, the Goa bits in Goa, the Mexican bits in Mexico. If the characters have something of me in them, so does Sunny. And in a way, I think actually Sonia and Sunny both have a lot to do with me. And they're kind of two halves of me. Some of the relationships are fictionalized, not all of it. Yes, there's some very, very toxic and abusive relationship in Sonia's life. Some of the other extreme moments of Sonia's life are also fictionalized. There's a very brutal scene in Rajasthan. But other things are close. As you said, she wants to be a writer and she grapples with many of the questions I've grappled with, but also her relationship with her father up on the rooftop in horse cars. I drew very much on my father, and the book is dedicated to him. Yes, that veranda in Allahabad, which belonged to my father's parents. I think I started about Inheritance of Loss and The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny start, I think, in the same sort of veranda. And my mother's book, Fasting Feasting, also begins on a veranda like that. And I think how funny it is that that veranda is somehow the place where my books begin, my grandparents' veranda. And I never knew my mother's parents, but my father's parents were, well, very vivid to me and very important to my literary life. You know, people say that a happy life gives one as much material, and a happy artist is as good as an unhappy one. But Sonia, I think, or Sonia and Ilan make this observation. But I do think that a knowledge of darkness, along with the lighter, more beautiful moments, makes you a better artist.
So that was just a little bit of a take on the book from the author, Kiran
I
Desai.
do think that.
And now let me introduce all of you to our guest speaker for today, Professor Anuradha Needham. And she has very graciously agreed to spend time with us because she is an expert in her own right as an emeritus professor at Oberlin College, which is a very reputed liberal arts college in Ohio, to say a few things about South Asian literature, because she's written a book called Using the Master's Tools, which is about the literature of the African and South Asian diasporas. And as an academic scholar, Professor Needham has written across a broad spectrum. The other books that you see on the slide, one of them is The Crisis of Secularism in India. The second one is New Indian Cinema in Post-Independence India, which is really take on the cultural work of Shyam Benegal's films. And finally, The Routledge Companion to Cultural Text and Nation. So she is both a professor of English and cinema studies. So please join me in welcoming her to our club, and let me hand over my virtual microphone to her to say a few words about South Asian literature, and then we can open up the floor for a few questions. Okay. So please go ahead, Anuradha.
I want to thank Milind. Actually, I should thank Fiona, who got in touch with Milind, or Milind, I don't know who got in touch with whom first, but I ought to thank Fiona for this particular occasion. I'm excited to talk with you all, but I hope that it'll be more a conversation than me just speaking about South Asian literature, because at this point you all may know more about South Asian literature than I do, because you all have been reading these books, as part of this group you all have formed. Um, I I thought one way to sort of approach the whole issue was through my own sort of intellectual biography, because I began off as a very, very traditional scholar. My dissertation was on Wordsworth and Spencer and Coleridge. You couldn't get more canonical than that. And for years, I taught Romanticism. And then uh, in late 70s and early 80s, things began to change. And I sort of want to point to a conjuncture, a particular moment when suddenly South Asian literature was being read, but was being read as representative of a certain kind of newness that had come into the field of English literature. And that that was, I think, well, there was one particular agent in 1980, I think, Rushdie's book, Midnight's Children, came out. And it was almost like South Asian literature had never existed before that, which is not fair, because there were people like Anita Desai and Mulk Raj Anand and others who had written, but it was almost as if that was the moment in which suddenly it became a part of the consciousness of people and I think it happened because it happened abroad. It was like suddenly got validated in a way that probably it wasn't while it was being read as a niche sort of phenomenon. And so, but Rushdie himself is part of a particular conjuncture because there was in 78, Edward Said's Orientalism comes out. And then in the 80s, Gayatri Spivak's work starts. She wrote this very famous essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? And then her collection of essays called In Other Worlds. And Homi Bhabha, with his. So Rushdie's work gets cited by them, and then so there's this peculiar convergence of a kind of critical interest in the Western circles, in places like the U.S. and England, and Rushdie gets the Booker Prize, of course, and then the Booker Prize is insistently, quite frequently. Kiran Desai was one of the winners, I think, for her Inheritance of Lost she got. So South Asian, I don't want to say that South Asian literature wasn't important, but it was a niche phenomenon, and it became a much more wider phenomenon. And the reason I bring attention to it is because in 85 onwards, I shifted from doing mainly canonical stuff into literature of the African and South Asian diasporas. At that point, I was giving equal attention to a lot of African writers and Caribbean writers and South Asian writers. In fact, the South Asian writers I was looking at were mainly diasporic writers like Hanif Qureshi and Salman Rushdie. But then you get, once that phenomenon establishes itself, you get people like Arundhati Roy. But I remember when Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things came out, people made such a big deal, and I justifiably so, that she was a homegrown talent, that she came out of India. She didn't have the diasporic credentials. She almost became the more authentic writer for that reason. And then you get a whole, but what also starts happening is there's a widening of the field. It's not just Indians, it's also Pakistani writers. There's a brief period during which Pakistani writers are suddenly very, very prominent. People like Nadeem Aslam and Muhammad Hanif and the guy who's written East West. Oh God, what's his name? Mohsin, or Hamid. So there's a period during which it's Indian writers, and of course Rushdie claims lots of countries for himself. He says, I'm British, I'm English, I'm British, I'm Indian, I'm Pakistani. And then there are people like Nadeem Aslam and all are British Pakistani writers. And then you get people like Danial Moinuddin, who grows up in Wisconsin, but then goes back to Pakistan and writes about that. He has come up with a new book that I'm just waiting to get my hands on. And so what you get and then there are writers from Bangladesh. In fact, one of my favorite books came out about, I would say, 10 years ago, a writer called Zia Haider Rahman. I don't know how many of you encountered his work. It's called In the Light of What We Know. It's a gorgeous book. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a wonderful, wonderful novel. And so what you get is really not so much Indian writers. Amitav Ghosh, for example, he becomes he becomes prominent not just as a novelist, but as a writer of his historical, ethnographic, anthropological, even archaeological studies. So what you're getting is people who are spread across disciplines. One of the things, as I was thinking about today's, my remarks today, it struck me a lot of it has to do with history. Almost everyone we will have read. I would include Kiran Desai in that. It's not just history as background, it's history as it's being lived almost, So What also happened with South Asian literature was it took us back to our history. It's almost as if we discovered our identities at that point, um, especially for people like me who left India. I had my education was mainly Indian. I went to Delhi University. I had most of my BA and MA and for first 4 years of teaching were done in Delhi. But then after that, when I came to the States, um, it was at that point that suddenly India became very important, through these novels, through the history. And I would like to suggest that probably, and I can't speak for, I don't know where you all are. I mean, Milind mentioned where several of you are located, whether it isn't of it's the, I'm not speaking about nostalgia here. I'm speaking about a certain kind of a visceral attachment that this literature connects us to, and that becomes so significant for us. For example, for years, I had been trained in sort of canonical British literature, which I felt quite close to because I was reading, but it wasn't until I started teaching South Asian literatures and African literatures and literatures that came out of a particular kind of formation that the literature actually started to matter. And I think part of the delight that I get out of all this work is that there is a kind of immediacy to it. There's a kind uh, of visceral identification that goes an enormous distance in sort of making it meaningful. So that when you read, for example, one of the things that I enjoyed, among the things I enjoyed about Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny was just recognizing certain landscapes, not just physical landscapes, but also sort of social landscapes, when she's talking about house and which are all places that I'm familiar with. And so I was most alive to those moments. I was most detached from the moments when she is not in those places. And I don't live in Delhi anymore. So it's partially at least a function of um, that is how we feel close to home. But it's also that it's also a kind of pride in that we are subjects of literary efforts, that we can aspire to that, can become. So I sort of want to pause there and ask if you all have, when you all respond to the literature, the novels you read or the books you all read, whether that is part of your attraction to the works you all read. I'm just curious if any of you
Mhm.
want to offer anything on that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Anyone
please,
want to say anything about how you connect
Ishan
with
wants.
literature you read? Yeah, Ishan, go ahead.
So, actually, to my mind, because we're a varied group, one thing is coming across to me very clearly that uh, people's experiences of India, you know, um, very much based on where you are currently. Like I find a lot of these books the market is also nostalgia of India of the 50s and 60s. And I was like a person who's left India 30, 40 years ago, like parts of my family connect so much better to it than I do because I'm looking at this and
Mhm.
saying, but this is not India of 2000. What is
Mhm.
India talking about? This is India of the 60s, or this is
Mhm.
India of the 70s. And this time warp, I think, is quite common. But
Mhm.
I think, therefore, one of the reasons why the sort of South Asian authors are more popular overseas than they are here um, is perhaps because they relate much more to an NRI mindset
Mhm.
than they do to the Indian mindset when we're not that nostalgic about the 60s. Yeah, I mean, Fundina, but uh, uh, every member of my family who's overseas, I mean, is very nostalgic about the 60s. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling, and I don't think that warm, fuzzy feeling translates to people who sort of lived in India. It's just an observation because it was coming sharply through to me when reading Anita Desai's book that, part of my brain was saying, what's she talking about? This is 2000 and she's talking about, potties that don't work and lizards and, in 2000, it wasn't like this, as opposed to uh, someone who grew up overseas, who has been overseas for 30, 40 years, say, oh, yeah, but their memory is a 60s memory transported to 2000. It's just an observation.
Thank you, Ishan.
Can I say something?
Sure. Vinita, go ahead.
When I read Jhumpa Lahiri, for instance, I was able to relate with everything she was talking about, I don't forget the name of her book, where she's talking about Calcutta and the Naxalite movement. Because I grew up in Calcutta, and every little thing that she was talking about, I was able to relate with. And that was good. That actually made me feel like, reading the book even faster because I was able to relate with that. So,
yeah. Great.
I think, can I just, I
Sure.
think one of the things that happened was, especially the conjuncture I'm pointing to, late 70s on to early late 90s. I would say that was the efflorescence of a certain kind of South Asian literature that was being embraced. That was also a moment when history and literature were working very closely together. I mean, historians, for example, were quoting writers, literary writers, people like Gyan Prakash and others. They would begin their essays, they were writing historical essays about modern India, or Gyan Prakash has worked on the Dalits and the bonded labor and all that. But they would begin by quoting literary stuff. And there was this peculiar kind of, if not a symbiotic relationship, then at least a kind of a convergence of interests, So we were almost reading it, or at least I was. I understand Ishan's point about nostalgia, but I don't think it's just nostalgia. It's almost as if at a certain point, and I would say late 70s to like almost the early 2000, to 2010 or so, I would say it was almost as if we found ourselves as subjects. It was not just nostalgia. It was that in India, while in India, we when we did literature there, even now they still do canonical British stuff. They don't teach South Asian literature. South Asian literature and all are special papers. When I did my MA, it was a special paper. Indo-Anglian literature was a special paper. It wasn't taught. So English departments, for example, literature departments still tend to. Meenakshi Mukherjee was a very unusual sort of person who wrote about Indo-Anglian literature. Otherwise, mostly it was so. I think you're right in terms of how we diasporic people react to, but I also think that the way we grow up in India in literary in the literature departments is we are very alienated from this stuff. So we almost had to go to the States to sort of find out that we ourselves mattered as subjects. Then that so it's not just nostalgia; it's a way of sort of almost finding yourself, that became important. And that's a kind of niche that South Asian literature filled. I think Anjali wants to say something.
Yeah, Anjali, go ahead.
I wanted to just add to the conversation. I think both points of view have some merit in them. And if you take a writer like Amitav Ghosh, maybe he's able to span it because he talks about a time which is so far removed from us that we are able to identify, we do not identify necessarily, but we get lost in the fiction of that, it's historical fiction in a way. Whereas when Arundhati Roy's attraction for so many people is that she's talking about a Kerala which still exists. or did
Right.
exist at the time she wrote about it.
Right.
And the next book that we're doing, Banu Mushtaq, the Kannada book,
Yeah.
Art Lamp, she has also managed to talk about a society which still exists. So the thing is that the context of Kiran Desai's book is quite phenomenal, and she's written it beautifully. But what has happened here is that she set it. She set the timing wrong. She says it's 1996 or something, but by then all this didn't really so the setting is slightly incorrect. But otherwise, these are things that we can relate to from our grandfather's time. They don't exist much anyway. But that was just a point of view that Amitabh Ghosh and Arundhati Roy have managed to sort of break this, and even Banu Mushtaq.
So in the interest of time, these comments were very valuable, Anuradha. But we have time for a couple of questions. If anybody has a question for our guest speaker. Yeah, Anjali, go ahead.
So I just loved your point of view that we love the fact that we are now subjects, and it's exciting. And you mentioned that it was a special subject. Has that changed, or is the study of South Asian literature now mainstream?
Okay, so under the broader rubric of post-colonial literature, which includes a lot of other stuff. I don't know. I've been gone from Indian academic institutions for so long. I don't know whether they have it as subjects on. So far as I'm aware, they still are doing. For them, British literature. It's British literature that's at the center of the department. The other literatures occupy a sort of. So I think they're smuggling some in, but not it. Not, for example, when I came to the States, that's when I got to teach this stuff, which has always struck me with a certain kind of irony. When I was teaching in India, I taught at Indraprasth College for 4 years. I used to teach Spencer, I would teach Wordsworth, I would teach all sorts of canonical writers, but I never taught an Indian writer there. Whereas when I came to the States, and my job in Oberlin was specifically in this field. So it's also a question of, I understand what you're saying, but I think one of the ways in which we recognize ourselves as subjects was, for the first time, we were allowed to teach stuff that was close to us, that mattered to us, that had a work that had characters who were recognizable to us as ourselves, in a way that the others hadn't been. So I think to that extent, I would say that South Asian literature is a phenomenon of what happened abroad, what happens in Western institutions. But that's also because of the kind of emphasis that they have given to this work that is still absent in places in India and other places.
Right. Nidhi, you had a question for her?
If there's time,
yeah, go ahead. Let's take it as the last question.
Okay.
From us.
So I loved Professor Anuradha's comments. Thank you. That was interesting to hear. My questions were actually twofold, but they're kind of related. That in recent years, for the first time, Indian translations, Gitanjali Shri and Banu Mushtaq have won awards. And the writers in the regional languages tend to be, in a way, closer to or more representative of an India that some of us are not that representative of. And related to that, there are these writers like Chetan Bhagat and Amish Tripathi who write in English and apparently are very popular. I've read both of them, not particularly good in my opinion, but like very popular. And a lot of people don't read Arundhati Roy or Salman Rushdie or, any of the folks we've been talking about, but they read these folks. They are not recognized as being representative of South Asian literature. Why is that? Shouldn't regional language writers and popular writers be considered because they're actually speaking for and relating to a larger section of the population than, Kiran Desai, Amitabh Ghosh, Salman Rushdie, etc., etc.
Well, some of it has to do with I think there's a kind of Orientalism that functions in the field, that the West must validate a particular stat before it becomes valuable, and these people never make the. I think some of that. I mean, that has been a very standard critique of a lot of post-colonial literature, that it is literature that the West has validated and recognized as important. And so that means that counts for South Asian literature. I think part of it is also that there's a larger field which includes, as I said, the Caribbean, Africa, and others, so that there's a certain kind of dispersal there. And within each of them, you'll find a similar point being brought up, that why are the quote regional talents or the vernacular talents not recognized in the same way? And I think some of that may have to do with the lack of translation. And that is why when someone like, the Heart Lamp, Banu Mushtaq, and when that starts becoming more prominent, then that regional stuff will enter. Which is why I turned to Indian cinema, because I just, after a certain point, you get tired of the rehearsal of similar themes, and so I found Indian cinema a really valuable field, because I'd always been a great, cinema goer, and it gave me a kind of hold on. I don't want to make the case that it's somehow more authentic, but I felt I felt closer to that as well, So through Benegal, I worked on Benegal most extensively, but I've been working lately on the cinema of the golden. Now again, people will say, why are the 50s? Because 50s was when that cinema mattered to me. So I'm working on cinema from what I call the golden years of Indian cinema, which is 50s and 60s. So I'm undoubtedly working with people like, on the work by Guru Dutt and others, but that I feel allows me gives me a different kind of perspective on South Asia.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, it
This
was
was
called the Golden Age for a reason. They are great films.
yeah. This was a delightful conversation, Professor Anuradha. And I must say, when you find time and when we have another book that you wish to talk about, we'd love to invite you again. So
Sure.
I'm going
Thank
to
you
keep
very
that
much.
door
Thank you for
open. Okay.
yeah.
Uh,
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Lovely to
appreciate
meet you.
your
Thank you.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. So
Thank
you
Bye.
won't mind if I leave now? If I leave the
That's
group now?
perfectly fine. I know
And
you are
just
an
to
early
your
riser, so we should let you go.
And
Thank
just to
you.
your point, at Xavier's, they do teach literature, Indian literature now, and PhD people are doing PhDs and all. But Vinita and you can connect offline. She'll probably have more details on that. But thank you. It was amazing listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very
Very
much.
kind.
Thank you for
Thanks a
inviting me,
lot.
Milind. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
So let me go back and see if I succeed in sharing the slides again. Can you see the slide?
On your point, before the slides come up, Nidhi, Amish and this Chetan Bhagat outsell your other authors by about 1,000 to 1.
Exactly. That's why I brought it up, because
They're just laughing all in the back. I've discussed this with Amish. They're happy just selling and saying, bugger all these guys who think they're intellectual.
And then they're reaching out for intellectual readers, just reading out to the mass public, and they are successful.
Hugely. I mean,
That is a different genre, Ishan. That is basically popular culture.
It's
In
one
movie world also, we have commercial film and the art film. It's the
Yeah.
same kind of.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that was a great discussion, and we should try and get people like her to converse rather than have one-way speeches.
actually hearing about the films would be great too. I'm a fan of 50s and 60s films as well. I'd love to hear more.
Yes.
Love to see more, Nidhi.
I
Love to see
agree
more.
with you, Nidhi. The art
the
films
moment
of that time were
she
Super.
said Sham Benegal, I was really very keen on listening to her, because like Satyajit Ray, Shyam Benegal's movies and the social consciousness
Huge.
that it generated was huge during those years.
Satyajit Ray was here.
Yeah. So let me continue with our discussion on the book today with Nidhi as the reader of the month. And she's done a stupendous job by not only choosing a very fascinating book and perhaps the longest book we have read in the book club so far, but also choosing in Abdul and Sandeep, two very thoughtful reflectors. So let's listen to an overview and an elaboration on theme from Nidhi first, and then we'll go to the reflections. So all yours, Nidhi.
Okay. I'll race through it, Milind. Try to keep it to the under 5 minutes quota.
That's okay. If you go to 6 minutes, no big deal.
Okay. The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny by Kiran Desai was a very enjoyable read. I enjoyed all 688 pages of it. I just wish I could have read it more slowly, savoring it like a good single malt, as Chacha so eloquently put it, enjoying the beautiful language, the rich imagery, and the insightful side comments. Sadly, I had to race through it to meet the book club deadline, but I do plan to reread it in a more leisurely way. That is said with a big crossing of fingers because 688 pages again will be quite something. On the surface, it's a love story about two young people, Sonia and Sunny, students in the US from India, who meet in a train traveling from Delhi to Allahabad while they are on holiday in India. Both sets of grandparents live in Allahabad, are old friends, and at one time had even suggested an arranged marriage between Sonia and Sunny, which did not go anywhere. Both have had prior relationships, Sonia with an older, rich, and often abusive painter, Ilan, and Sunny with an all-American girl from Iowa named Ula. Neither relationship has worked out. Sonia and Sunny fall in love, spend time together in Goa, part, spend time together again in Venice, part again, and at the end are perhaps again getting together in Goa. Into this framework, Kiran Desai weaves in many other themes and characters, all written without moralizing or judgment and in a witty and light hand. Her command of words and expressive abilities are so very impressive. The next page. So the other themes that she weaves in, the loneliness of immigrants who don't fully belong in either their adopted or their home countries. The reaction to this can range from a refusal to associate with their own kind, the path that is taken by many of the westernized elites such as Sonia and Sunny, or the other extreme of associating exclusively with their own kind, which seems to be the path chosen by Satya, Sunny's childhood friend. The isolation, lack of understanding, and perhaps even mutual fear and dislike of different classes of people, like servants versus masters in India, the heartland versus coastal elites in US, and as an example, the Shah and Bhatia family servants in Allahabad and Delhi, or Sunny's visit to Ula's parents in the heartland are described in good detail. Another theme is the different kinds of love, the love that is needed by two lonely people such as Sonia and Sunny, the possessive and frightened love of Sunny's mother Babita for him, the no questions asked love of Sonia's grandparents, the love that once was romantic and conventional but becomes supplanted by the love for one's own individuality, such as by Sonia's mother Meher and her father, the desire for love by the roadside Romeos Sonia meets in Rajasthan and Goa, and even the possessive and abusively demented love of Ilan for Sonia. And I wonder what all of you thought of some of the more surreal aspects of the book. These are the things that I found interesting. The gaze or the eye. Throughout the book, there is reference to the eye. First, it seems it is someone else's eye. Then it turns out to be Ilan's eye, that by looking at someone or something defines it. Mainly through Sonia's character, Desai explores how we let ourselves be defined and controlled by the gaze of other people. Sort of a little bit like what Professor Anuradha was saying too, that now I feel that we are letting South Asian literature be defined by Booker Prize winners and what's taught in American universities. But anyway, Badal Baba, he is a faceless amulet inherited by Sonia from her grandfather. Are people without a clear sense of identity like Sonia and Sunny to some extent faceless? Or like Badal Baba, who can transform and pass through even the narrowest mountain passes? Are they finally, after initial struggles, evolving to a better version of themselves? Satya, unlike Sunny, is much more rooted in one culture and thus seems to be living a more centered life than Sunny. But is this desirable? Ilan steals Sonia's Badal Baba, but Sunny steals it back. So if the West stole from India and others, is it now okay for others to steal from the West? Badal Baba's origins are with Sonia's grandfather, but the grandfather's story varies. Should we accept family stories of the past as reliable? And then the third point was the ghost town and the shadow snow leopard. Is this reflective of her trauma from Ilan? Why, but why is her grandfather fearful of the snow leopard as well? And then lastly, I was quite intrigued by the many similarities between Sonia and Kiran Desai. Like Kiran Desai, Sonia is a student at a college in Vermont. Sonia is working on a book about a man who climbs into a tree. There are shades here of Kiran Desai's first book, Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard, where a boy climbs into a tree in a guava orchard. Sonia is of mixed German through her mom and Indian heritage, as is Kiran Desai, whose mother, Anita Desai, had a German mother. Sonia's mother retreats to a cottage in Missouri, Landur in the book, which is right next to Missouri. Anita Desai moved away from her husband to England and then to the US. Sonia is lonely. Perhaps Kiran Desai, who spent 20 years between her second book and this one, feels alone and or lonely too. But the results of this solitude have been a fine book, in my opinion, grand in its sweep and imagery, with many astute observations about immigrants and cultures.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Nidhi. That was a lovely overview of the book and some thought-provoking questions. So just quickly responding to one of your surrealism ideas, I wondered, especially because we had read some Latin American authors, thanks to Abdul earlier, whether this surrealism is similar or akin to magic realism. And we can talk about this during the open session. But that was a counter question that I came up with listening to you. So thank you for that lovely overview. And with that, let's go to a couple of reflections before we throw it open for our own discussion among all of us. Sandeep, are you here? Okay,
He
so
was.
earlier today, Sandeep realized that he had to attend another meeting in person, and so he had to excuse himself. So for the next 5 or 6 minutes, just imagine my voice is Sandeep's voice, and I can share his thoughts with all of you. So the book is about two Indian protagonists navigating the alienation of the modern world and who have been brought together by their Allahabad-based grandfathers. Ironically, their fates keep them apart, occasionally intersecting their paths across continents as globe-trotting orphans. Sonia is an aspiring novelist from Delhi and a student in a snowy, desolate Vermont college. She feels completely disconnected from her peers and her family back home, who cannot fathom her Western brand of depression. Sunny, on the other hand, is a struggling journalist in Brooklyn and trying to outrun his overbearing mother Babita and the violence of his warring clan in India. Sunny finally settles professionally, becoming an American green card holder, while Sonia is marooned in India and is getting tossed between her father and mother, though occasionally sneaking out to rendezvous or holiday with Sunny. Despite their initial embarrassment over the failed matchmaking, they are instantly captivated by one another. This begins a will they, won't they romance that mirrors the tension between tradition or the family's wish and autonomy, that is, their own choice. However, prior to their encounter in Allahabad while in the US, both had inculcated friendships with white foreign companions, Ilan and Ulla. Ilan, a famous painter, is much older. Sonia, desperate for connection, becomes Ilan's muse and gets manipulated. His ill treatment of Sonia and robbing her of a prized possession, an amulet called Badal Baba, hankers Sonia through most of the book. Ilan exerts a dark spell over Sonia, influencing her writing but emotionally abusing her. The book explores the cost of art and how loneliness makes one vulnerable to predatory intimacy. Ulla, on the other hand, walks out of Sunny's life when the latter is on a visit to India. Kiran Desai also vividly captures the daily lives of the well to do families in India, along with their retinue of household staff, drivers, pets, their wide circle of friends, their value systems, their habits, their anxieties, the challenges of living in India, and their expensive tastes. Also highlighted are the cracks in their relationships, the bickering and backbiting, but despite which they still seem to cling together as if they can't do without each other. The book also brings out the baggage of family bonds, which the newer generations must be cognizant of as an inheritance. The book travels over a vast canvas: mountains, plains, deserts, beaches, and oceans. The atmosphere is always aristocratic: Rosenthal crockery, Stilton cheese, La Mer skincare potions, etc. The main characters in the book have an overseas travel history. Is it to escape from a self inflicted loneliness? All the husband wife relationships in the book have been shown to be acidic and incompatible. The character of Satya, Sunny's friend from the US, stands out as very distinct from the rest. He's a doctor in the US and from a middle class Indian family. His methodology of visiting India to choose a bride and involving Sunny is humorous, including taking Sunny with him to Goa for his own honeymoon. The book is a good insight into the lives of the Indian diaspora that nowadays straddles across the India and the US, with children nearly settled abroad and their parents in India gradually sauntering into their twilight years. I thought it was very nicely written. I hope my reading conveyed the feelings that Sandeep wanted to express. So thank you for
Yeah.
listening to that.
Milind, you read so well. I would like you to read mine too.
Abdul, you write well and you read even better. So I'm not going to do that for you. So that's the second reflection that we should be now listening to. And as I read Sandeep's reflection, I was also internally reflecting on how well Abdul has expressed his ideas. So let's listen to him. Go ahead,
Thank you,
Abdul.
Milind.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Kiran Desai's novel about loneliness came out after a long wait last year and received uniformly rave reviews. Clearly, this is one of the most ambitious literary endeavors undertaken by an Indian author and deserves serious reflection on our part, as she is exploring the aspirations and contradictions of Indian middle class life, a class that broadly includes most of us and set in locales that many of us are familiar with. Kiran Desai's effort was to produce a book of epic proportions, not only in terms of length, but also in terms of a large cast of characters and many subplots within the plot, just as many Indian epics are. In that sense, although novels as a literary form is not very Indian, this book is quintessentially Indian. Unlike modern epics like 100 Years of Solitude, the locations shift across continents, but the events are more compressed in time. For the two main characters of the book, loneliness is an inherent condition that is not easily remediable. Throughout the book, Sonia never mentions a close friend, either in India or in the US, though she has a few acquaintances in Vermont. For an Indian student in New York, the only person Sunny has any connection with is a friend from his school days. They have no siblings, and their relationship with their parents is complicated. Their loneliness is exacerbated by displacement that makes it difficult for them to find a cultural and social footing. The US is a society where people have lots of connections and networks, but few real friends, because the ruthless individualism of the US society does not prepare its members to learn how to open up, reveal their vulnerabilities to others, and establish relationships that transcend the transactional nature of everyday interaction. The book is clearly the result of incredible effort. She has done considerable research to describe the many locations where the action takes place in such vivid detail. She shifts effortlessly from the streets of Allahabad to the southern suburbs of New Delhi, to snowy and cold Vermont, to the busy and vibrant New York, the fading colonial elegance of Goa, the made-for-movie romance scenes in Venice, and finally to remote provinces of Mexico. Even the amount of research she has done into kebabs is impressive, and she weaves that very easily into the broader narrative by getting Sonia to write an article on kebabs for a vanity magazine. Sonia finds the kebab to be almost metaphorical. Massaged, marinated, oiled, spoiled, pampered, pompous, romantic, a perfumed aristocrat. There were so many kebabs they fell right out of the article. When she tried to write about the culture of each one, the material ballooned. This was India, she thought. You might try to write a slender story, but it inevitably is connected to a larger one. Another aspect of Desai's writing is her command of the language. One may describe Michael Ondaatje's writing as lyrical, Rushdie's writing as exuberant, but I am at a loss to find the correct adjective for Kiran Desai, maybe because she writes in many voices. She is lyrical when she describes places, reflective when she talks of loneliness, sarcastic when she describes the foibles of Indian middle class, and magical when she describes Ilan's paintings and the Hound. To weave together a story that connects the lives of more than 30 characters takes considerable planning and preparation. She has accomplished that in a seamless fashion and deserves credit for doing so. But there is much about the book that prevents it from becoming a modern-day classic that will be read 2 or 3 decades from now. First, the story could have been told in far fewer pages, which would have made it tighter instead of a rambling, meandering volume. Second, the plot seems rather contrived with its improbable coincidences, like Sonia and Sunny encountering each other in the train. But a bigger flaw that I felt was that the two main characters are difficult for an average reader to relate to. That is, in the case of this book, it is hard to establish the emotional connection that a reader develops with the main characters in good novels. In that sense, Desai reminded me of Milan Kundera, whose books are philosophical reflections on a central theme, packaged and interpreted through the characters and the plot. Abusive lovers are not uncommon in real life and literature, examples of his choice. But Ilan remains a caricature than a real person throughout the story. In a great book, the author is almost invisible, and the story takes on a life of its own. Here, the author is ever present, with her long reflections on the diaspora experience, or the Indian identity issue in the aftermath of 9/11. A
Mhm.
good editor would have asked her to put some of these passages in a separate essay rather than insert it in the body of work.
Mhm.
Just like Nidhi, I also found a lot of autobiographical sort of uh, material creeping into the character of Sonia. For
Mhm.
the sake of time, I will skip that paragraph.
Mhm. Should I go?
Ultimately,
Mhm.
hmm?
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah. No. Uh, I just
Ultimately,
wanted
the
to
book
know.
is, sorry.
S- Yeah. Sorry, Abdul. Go ahead.
Yeah. Ultimately, the book is a reflection on human loneliness. Loneliness is a fundamental condition of human life that none of us can escape. We are social animals and find pleasure and solace in the company of others. But even when surrounded by friends, family, or even strangers, loneliness still lingers in the deep recesses of our psyche. Some
Mhm.
find an antidote to loneliness in romantic love, but all relationships are complicated, and even romantic love often turns rancid over time and becomes a struggle for control and domination, as Sonia found her relationship with Ilan slowly becoming toxic.
Mhm.
Others seek escape from loneliness through spirituality, the belief that a superior power of questionable provenance is always with you, listening to your inner thoughts and prayers. They carry
Mhm.
amulets or wear a cross on their necklace or recite the scripture 1,000 times to drown out
Mhm.
the nagging pain of loneliness.
Mhm.
Sonia's mother, did I get her name wrong? Was it Seher or Meher?
Uh, I
Okay,
Seher.
either
I
Seher.
think it is
Seher
here.
finds a third solution. She escapes from not only an unhappy marriage, but also from all the demands of social life for an upper middle class family in South Delhi by retreating to the mountains. She tells Sonia, there are worse things than loneliness. Loneliness could mean abiding peace. It could mean understanding your happiness backward. When you happen to exclaim aloud, surprising yourself when there was no apparent reason, I am happy. The beauty
Mhm.
of the book is that the defining line on loneliness is delivered by Sonia's mother, who has a relatively small footprint in the book. Perhaps in the evening of our lives, this book club is a place for us to escape from our loneliness as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abdul. That was a beautiful reflection, and particularly, I like the contemplative tone of your last sentence. Perhaps in the evening of our lives, the book club is a place for us to escape from loneliness. Beautiful.
Very
Uh,
nice.
yeah. So, Abdul also had expressed a thought in the chat which differentiated between loneliness and solitude. And that has led me to the small little soliloquy on the next slide that I'm going to have you listen to. Of loneliness, solitude. Poetry offers solace for the lonely and a positive perspective on being alone. As Sarton, a poet, said in the Journal of a Solitude, loneliness is the poverty of self, while solitude is richness of self. Poetry's relationship with solitude is quite paradoxical. While many poets savor the isolation needed to write their best work, the finished product will create connection or sometimes even community. So here is a beautiful poem which I liked on these ideas. From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source, I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. That's Alone by Edgar Allan Poe. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Very nice.
That was nice.
Thank you. So that opens the floor for all of us to contribute to what we've read, and a solid 688 pages, which I'm happy to say 2 hours ago I finally completed.
Nidhi, I just wanted to respond to your comment about Chetan Bhagat and Amish Tripathi. In the West also, there are so many writers who sell millions of copies of their book. But some are quite exciting to read, like Dan Brown, for example. But in a few years from now, nobody is going to remember them. You remember when we were young, everybody was reading James Hadley Chase. The current generation has not even heard of them. Okay. The difference I find is that these books are essentially what I call entertainment products. They're not literary works. They don't claim artistic merit. They are packaged and marketed like any other entertainment product. And for a while, it sells well. So they belong to a different I wouldn't call them a different category of book. It's a different industry altogether.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what you define as literature. If you're teaching or learning or, have a class called South Asian literature, what is literature? Is it what a committee decides is something that is well written? Is it determined by the marketplace, as in what sells the most? And as to how far
Nidhi, I
something...
cannot hear you.
Oh,
I can hear
sorry.
you.
Yeah, I can hear.
We can all hear.
Yeah.
Milind,
We can all hear Milind.
We can hear
It's your problem.
you, Nidhi.
What's
No, I
that?
can't.
Put the
Yanks?
sound off. On your laptop, just put the sound on.
On my laptop.
No, Nidhi, you're fine.
You're
You're
fine.
We can hear
fine.
Nidhi. We can
We
hear
can hear
Nidhi.
you now. Yeah.
Milind would have turned his.
No, I think it stalled for a minute. But go ahead, Nidhi. We didn't get to
So
hear.
anyway, I was just making the point, who defines literature and what is it and what is it defined by? And as far as lasting power is concerned, that we'll only know 200 years or 100 years after the fact. Whether Chetan Bhagat will be remembered more 10 years from now or whether Kiran Desai will be remembered, who knows? So that was the only point I was trying to make, that the definition of literature is something that maybe needs to be broadened, or I'm not saying anything one way or the other. I'm just bringing up the point.
So, Nidhi, I'll interject at this point. I think literature is very often defined by what we study in school or college. So, for example, Charles Dickens, was a popular writer. He wrote for entertainment, he wrote to sell. He needed to make money. So he was, as somebody described, a popular writer. But he has become literature, maybe because obviously there's depth and meaning and fabulous literary craft in his writing. But the fact that he was taught again and again in very many schools and colleges across the world has helped him to sort of enter the public consciousness. Shakespeare, despite the fact that the language is antiquated, he was a popular writer. He wrote for the theater. But because it's been taught again and again and again, we've got it. We have the Greek writers. They were also taught. All Greek historical literature was taught to us as classical writing. So we have become familiar with it. When our textbooks of our Indian authors come to being taught, and that's why it was so important to have Professor Anuradha talk to us, because if this popular literature is only going to be taught in the diaspora outside and not in India, how will it become literary? Mulk Raj Anand is considered to be literature because he's taught. If you look at some of our Indian authors who are taught who write in different languages, they are considered to be literary writers because they are actually part of our curriculums.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I think that's a good definition. What is taught gets closer to being literature than what is not taught.
Yeah. Nidhi, Pushpita wants to say something. Go ahead.
I feel we are judging everything by the language English. English over the years itself has changed. It's like Dickens' English, Shakespearean English was very different from the kind of English today's modern, from the kind of English an Australian writer writes. It's English that is of a class of its own. And I think that there are some amazing vernacular writers in India, but just because I know Oriya literature is very, very strong, but perhaps because it's not translated into that common English language, it just doesn't get as much visibility as any other book written in English. So
Yeah,
I
and I
think
just want to quickly say, Pushpita, in continuation of your thought, sorry to interrupt you,
no,
that I
that's fine.
have often had a pet peeve for many years that for this reason, when somebody's work gets the Jnanapith award in India, that's the highest literary award, a lot of it is lost on the rest of us because if it's written in Malayalam or in Odia,
Yeah.
I have no way of accessing that literature unless
Yeah.
somebody like Deepa Bhashti takes the trouble to translate what Banu Mushtaq wrote. And fortunately, we are going to read that next. So,
Yeah.
that's a very valid
Translation
point.
need not necessarily be into English.
Mhm.
When I was growing up, I had read all the Bengali novels because as soon as it comes out in Bengali, it used to be translated into Malayalam without passing through English at all.
Right.
Okay. But I was not familiar with, say, Oriya literature because nothing in Oriya was ever translated into my language. So what I think at one point, the National Book Trust or so used to kind of identify books in a particular language and give contracts to people in 10, 15 languages to translate to various regional languages. And I agree with all of you. The vernacular literature in India is amazing. Very often the problem is it cannot be translated into English, even if you are an English expert. The
Hopefully
nuance.
with AI in the hopefully with AI coming in now, we'll overcome some of these hurdles.
It's already
The
happening.
nuances get
It's already
lost.
happening. The Indian government has created something called Bhashini, which is the brainchild of Nandan Nilekani, and you already have it can automatically be translated into some 24 languages. So Abdul, you should start a trust on this because the software is free. And all it really needs is to be entered into the Bhashini platform and you can get the books. But the identification of the right book and the translation is difficult. It's like, think about it as UPI for language. UPI has created a financial platform where all of us can connect with each other with bypassing the banks. Bhashini is the language platform where we can all connect with each other straight from Bengali to Malayalam or from Kannada to Telugu. Sorry.
This can be your retirement plan, and then I can support you from the tech platform.
Sharad,
The only
Sharad,
challenge
go ahead.
of this, Anjali and Abdul, on the translation side, is a bit like we have professionally even, is when you use these AI engines to translate, the quality of the translation is heartless, mindless.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
you're not going to get this. That's the whole point of literature, is the sentiment and the feeling and the creativity that you'll never get out of these machine translations. So I'd be very suspicious of something that goes through Google or Nandan Nilekani's Bhashini, unless it is vetted, unless it is looked at by somebody like Deepa Bhashti, for example.
100%.
Or take the Japanese authors like Murakami and Ishiguro, when they write in Murakami writes in Japanese, it's translated.
Sharad, just to respond to you.
Yes, please.
For last 6 months or 1 year, I have been experimenting on this.
Yep.
And you are right that just using a AI tool to translate, it doesn't work by itself. But having said that, it does about 70% of the job.
First draft, AI is good, but first draft, it cannot be, that's not the end of it all, is all I'm saying.
That's not end at all. But
Creativity of a writer to produce good literature. That cannot be machine driven.
Yeah. That's why I was so happy that the Booker Prize people decided to give the award not only to the original writer, but the translator of the work.
Yeah,
Because that
makes sense. That
translation
makes a lot of sense.
shows that you have to be equally competent in both languages, and you have to sort of move from one culture to another very seamlessly when you translate. So,
Nobody's commented on the stereotyping that Kiran Desai has done of the characters of that time. It's such a stereotypical Allahabadi, Delhi, Hoskas, Goa, all of them could come out of any Hindi movie if you really ask me. And that's the part that I wasn't comfortable with it at all. I mean, it's almost like a caricature of people it's our generation, by the way. People are like us, all of us. And I'm saying she's gone to an extreme which really doesn't ring true for me here.
yeah, sometimes I wonder if people write books in a way that they might appeal to filmmakers.
I'm going to say that it's a book that sells. Back to Chetan Bhagat. Sorry, with
Yeah,
due respect, the
yeah,
fact that 688
exactly.
pages doesn't make it better than a Chetan Bhagat.
Correct.
It's a bit like that with a bit mystical stuff thrown in. Yes, I agree. But
Yeah.
characterization is very, 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 sometimes bordering on the ridiculous, if you ask me.
Given so many of us have lived abroad, I was wondering how folks related to the, being neither here nor there. When you move abroad, how people have experienced the being away from home, being away from your friends and family, and sort of starting a new life. And and maybe Sonia and Sunny were young. They came in as students. Well, some of us probably did as well. But I think, Sharad, to your point, it was somewhat simplistic, somewhat. I actually found the book a quick read, much faster than the previous one, only because of the familiarity. There was familiarity with Delhi, there was familiarity with New York, and it sort of made the reading go by much faster than I expected. But I did find it could have been edited better. There were just pages or paragraphs that could have been taken out and nothing would have been lost.
I think part of the challenge, Nani, that Kiran Desai faced in an interview, she said, either in Kolkata or somewhere else, that she kept writing for many years. And by the time she got
5,000
done,
pages.
she had 5,000 pages.
5,000 pages.
And from those 5,000 pages, she had to extract a précis, which may have resulted in what we got.
That's where a good editor could have done a good job, better job.
Exactly. That's what Abdul said earlier.
I agree with Abdul.
It took
Totally
20
agree
years.
with Abdul.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculously
Abdul,
long. Descriptions are ridiculously long, unnecessary at times.
Totally unnecessary at times.
Arun?
I had one. Yeah, Nidhi and Abdul. Yeah, apparently she took about 10 or 15 years to write this novel. Is that true?
20 years.
Yes.
20 years, yeah. Isn't that too long a time
for
to
20 years.
She may have
She was
written about
absent
10
for
years.
20 years. Whether she was working on this novel or doing something else, not clear.
Yeah, but that's a very long span of time, and her own personality, thinking would have changed during those 2 decades, and how that manifested itself in the novel. You can see that it drags at times, and you wish it was a bit tighter in terms of, the sharper profile of the main characters and all. But you find it difficult to relate to any of the characters sometimes, So I'm just wondering, is that a factor in how this novel has come out, that she wrote it over a period of 10, 15, 20 years, when your perspectives literally change?
Actually, Arun, she talked about that in the, that link that Chacha sent us at the Lit
Also
Fest
from
interview.
Calcutta. Yeah.
She talked about that, is that, how you change and your perspective changes and what you're writing about sort of seems a little bit more alien to you when towards the end, when you're looking back.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Professor Anuradha passed on a tidbit of gossip that she was apparently in a relationship with
with that painter. Yeah.
So a large part of what she's written may be autobiographical.
Yeah, I think it's actually
even
more autobiographical than it seems. Yeah. And, to the extent that sometimes people write as a catharsis for themselves probably holds true for this novel more than for many others. It's a catharsis for the writer as well.
So an interesting piece of gossip or an observation. Ishan and I were at a dinner yesterday where Kiran Desai had been a house guest. And, it was a very elaborate dinner. And she had actually got involved in crafting the menus and rewriting, improving the language. And she was living with this lady. Their friendship was an old friendship over many years. So sometimes the extrapolation of loneliness from the book to a person's life and the fact that they find relationships difficult, which is what a lot of the a lot of the social media is talking about Kiran Desai, didn't seem to come through yesterday in the way, that the incident and the dinner unfolded. But from another point of view, this whole concept of loneliness, even the book is titled Loneliness. I think that is a theme which a lot of people are facing. And that's why Millen's point on the difference between loneliness and solitude is also something. I think the guy, what was that guy, Vikram or something, and Vivek Murthy wrote a book on loneliness and the challenge of loneliness in the US and, what people are facing. So that was
That's
also
the
something.
Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Actually, while Anjali was talking, I was remembering last night's dinner, and the other thing common with them, with the book and that last night's dinner, is everybody was set in the 50 years past. Everything there was old, they were Cambridge, everything was centered around this. The family had photographs with the Queen and, things like that. And I'm just trying to think whether it's another India that at least some of us don't relate to. Yeah. I mean, I was totally out of my depth. There were three people there that we knew well, which is why, they were visiting from London, which is why we went when we were called. But I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't relate to this. We were the first Indians to get this, and then the first, then get knighted by the Queen, and the something. And I was telling Anjali, मैं किधर आया हूँ यार? समझ नहीं आ रहा. Okay, so I'm saying that perhaps, there are different Indias, and this is all, Kandala is 300 years old at home. And, then in London, I don't know, maybe it's where we grew up. I grew up Indian middle class. I don't relate to this shit. So I don't know. I mean,
Also, Anuradha's point about the bridge between history and literature was interesting, I thought. That, it's via literature that we are sort of rediscovering our own history as well. And there are, of course, good young historians who are sketching the history of India since independence and so on. But there is that link between popular media like theater and movies, literature, and history. So that also we can't deny.
Cross that bridge, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't. Is it popular? Is it, he had the ability to have the insights into past, present, and future.
Yeah.
And then you talked about the other authors. So I think there are different markets. Yeah. It depends on where they are all ultimately selling a product.
Which is why this
And
book club
Ishan,
is so good, that we have different genres
Yes.
that we get to discuss
Yes.
over time. Yeah.
Ishan, just a comment on your different India and people remembering India from when everybody left. I think even when it's not just India and abroad and people living outside of India, but it's also when you live in a large country, everybody has their own. There are such different Indias and there's such different Americas.
Are there different Bombays? The Bombay I was in yesterday.
There you go.
Bombay I can relate to.
There you go. So I don't think it's only about if you live in India and therefore people who left India remember India of a different time. We all live in our own little ecosystems. And I think maybe Nidhi had talked about it. Even the comparison between, when someone in the US, just bi-coastal versus, in the heartland, it's completely different countries.
But, in her defense, I will say that some things, Sharad, I don't know what you feel about this, but some things were spot on, like with the grandparents, the retired judge or lawyer or whatever he was, and the rationing of a biscuit and a half for the Dari, the guy, the clerk who comes in to help. Yeah, the insistence on repairing and reusing things, but maintaining that genteel facade that it must be done just so. I mean, that was so spot
Sending
on.
dishes from one house to the other.
Yeah, yeah, with the napkin
Typical.
tied around the
Yeah.
plates and all that. Some of it she really got very well, I think.
I
I
was
love
curious
reading
to
about the
know
Indian side.
if Saida or Vikram have something to say. We are seeing them after a
Sorry, maybe one before
session.
Nidhi's point and what I said earlier was it was almost as if he was being critical of it as opposed to admiring it, that the way you might like to admire something that was nice. It was the way it came out, certainly many aspects of it came out as being extremely critical.
Yeah.
But these are nice things. These are nice gestures. In fact, these is something that you could do with today even there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sorry, Milind, am I taking too much time?
No. I was just wondering if Saida or Vikram want to say anything since they have been quiet.
Oh, I've been listening to the very interesting conversations, and it was this book was very long, but if you I don't know, it was very entertaining, and I could relate to some of the stuff because I was also about 15, 16-year-old when I came to States, and but it was also interesting to read about India, so that was interesting. I've never been to places like Goa, and it was, I don't know how you guys probably go there, and I don't know how it is, how how accurate it is what she was describing. But I enjoyed the all kinds of foods, and that was kind of interesting.
The kebabs. I
The
remember the
kebabs,
kebab.
yeah, kakori and galavati.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that because I love to cook, and so I'm planning to do that. But overall, I mean, I was kind of like disappointed with the I found Sonia, it's at times I just can't believe that she was in that relationship with Ilan for so long. I mean, how I was as a, especially for an Indian girl of with a good family and everything. I don't know. I was
I was curious to know what you all thought, that was this a sort of aberrant reaction to intense loneliness? Is that what she was trying to communicate? Because I agree with what Saida said. I would not have expected somebody with Sonia's background to get into that kind of a rather volatile or abusive relationship.
maybe she was so innocent. I don't know that she didn't know what a relation should be.
Mm.
I don't know.
It gets cold in Vermont for months.
A good one.
Yeah.
So true. But
You
you're
need
right,
some
Saida.
warmth.
This is something that I also wondered about. Where did this come from?
Exactly.
How did she allow this to happen to her? I mean, as they say, यहाँ पे पढ़ी लिखी लड़की क्या कर रही थी ये?
Correct.
But and from good family, like she had, but I don't understand. But everybody's
Wonder if
different.
this is autobiographical.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
Potentially, yes. Potentially, yes.
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially,
Yeah.
As you said,
possibly.
catharsis is finally coming out with it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, listen, guys, I need to
Srinivas,
run.
I gotta go.
sorry, Srinivas, if you had something to say, I'm sorry if I cut you off earlier.
No, it's fine. I think that is okay. That I was only talking more from the tech point of view, but there's a limited point. I think both Abdul and Sharad, I think we can have a private chat, and that's a very good idea. That I think this can be easily doable. Now the book club, we have so much of knowledge, and a lot of us have hopefully some time to spare. So I think that we can look at how we can leverage, because AI is good. I mean that with all the warps and some loss of the translation or meaning, but I think it does a very good job. I've done some translations of songs. I mean, one of the programs that I've done it, and I thought in English, and I made the thing, and then it came out beautiful. And then I wanted to do it in Hindi and Marathi, and I was amazed that Marathi translation came out so well. And when I showed it to my friends, they were amazed. I mean,
I have a suggestion, Yanks. I have a feeling that it'll do very well with translations where the language is very simple, which many of the original greats like Premchand and all in Hindi wrote in. They wrote very simply. It was the feelings came from the story, and not so much in total contrast to someone like Kiran Desai or Salman Rushdie and people like that who play a lot with words. So I'm thinking if we start with translations from people who wrote extremely simply, we might get 90% of the way there. And we go with the more complicated, where the words sort of tell the story rather than the story itself being communicated through simple words. So we could try applying that. Someone like Premchand or Saida Manto, right?
Yeah, Manto, right?
Manto.
They would be very good. Sadat Hassan Manto, very simple language, but the beauty of the story just comes from the story itself. One could try that.
I was reminded of a couple of stories we read in high school. One was Abu Kha Ki Bakri, which was by Zakir Hussain, who was the president of the country, wrote very well. And then there was the story that became a movie, Shatranj Ke Khiladi. That also was a short story that we read in school.
But even Banu Mushtaq is it falls in the same theme, right? Maybe.
Yes.
Very simple. I mean, I haven't read all the stories,
yeah.
but very simple theme, very simple setting. It's just translates very easily.
And I think the context is very important.
I agree with Niti's suggestion of Premchand, because we are Hindi challenged, but despite that, I found those books to be very easy to read and nice to understand. I mean, I could understand as a child. So I think that's one thing that we can start with.
I think Tamil and Malayalam, because Tamil is so rich in literature and none of us have any exposure. Or Oriya. Let's see, Hindi, you have some exposure. It goes into mainstream cinema. Where we are absolutely lacking is the Sanskritized kind of literature simply written, and that exists still in the South. And the South is a black box for people who are not from there. I would love. I mean, I keep hearing about Tamil literature being the richest in India, and we have zero exposure to Tamil.
That's true about Malayalam too. Both those languages.
True. We have no exposure. No, I was only saying it as a way of evaluating the quality of the translation. And based on that, then we know how much to value the AI translation. Because, we get it to translate something complex in Tamil. Is it good or bad? We don't know. We get it to translate Puski Rat. We know very well whether it's done a good job or not.
Exposed on Andhra boys. So maybe we should look at Andhra instead of Tamil Nadu. So to start with, because I mean, I have zero clue on Andhra literature. So look at some of the best of Andhra, simple from Andhra. And Abdul, you look at the Malayalam. And who from us can volunteer to? There has to be somebody who's local speaking who can volunteer to kind of analyze their literature. You know,
I mean,
yeah.
I think we'll take one experiment, Ishan. I think we'll pick one book as a small, simple one and experiment between us, and then whether it works.
Yeah, good idea.
Book club session, just analyzing the 2 or 3 books we've taken and managed to translate ourselves and see how we feel about it.
Right.
Vikram says Malayalam movies are fascinating. So, Vikram, do you have the name of a movie you've liked in Malayalam? I have never seen one yet.
Yeah, I would love to see some Malayalam movies.
Go to Netflix, you'll find many, maybe.
I do, but what's good and what isn't? How does one know?
So some of my friends can recommend. I can find. Abdul can recommend. I can check with my friends who recommended.
Yeah, I'll send you some recommendations.
Yeah, post them,
That would
please.
be good. Yeah,
That'll be good. Yeah.
Guys, I need to run. Okay.
Okay. Good talking.
Bye.
Good
Great,
seeing
guys.
all of
Thank
you.
you.
And
Bye.
let's meet
Bye.
next
Bye.
month.